Hello, everybody. Mike Westphal here, McDonald Garden Center. We're getting ready to teach you all about tomatoes. So that's our topic for today. Again, I'll just kind of talk about a little bit of some stuff before we get started, just to allow everybody to get here. It's 11 o'clock, but we'll get started here pretty soon. So we're doing these online seminars. We want to continue to educate our customers in these tough times. We know it's tough. So we want to continue the education and continue to talk about topics that are relevant to people right now and in the garden and what people want to know. So that's why we continue to do this. We hope you're enjoying them. If you haven't seen them, if you're a first-time seminar visitor, welcome. But if you have seen them before, thanks for joining again. And you can always watch these on our Facebook channel, as well as on our Facebook page, as well as our web page. We're going to try and get our notes done as quickly as we possibly can and get them up so you can have those notes. But this is just a great time for us to kind of continue our education. We wish you could come here and be in a big group and sit around and then we could talk to you. But we know that's not possible right now, and we want to be as safe as we possibly can, but continue to educate our customers. So again, thank you for joining us, and we're continuing to be here. Ask us questions anytime. Ask me questions during this seminar. I will get to them at the end. I will try and answer everybody's question at the end. But thanks again for joining us, and stay safe out there. If you'd like to come and shop with us, we are open 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. And just, think about the time that you come. We're a very large store. So we've got lots of space to keep our social distancing. We're practicing social distancing, and we're not trying to avoid you. We just want to be safe and keep that distance. And we're going to continue to do that. But please come in and ask us questions if you'd like. Ask us questions on our Facebook Messenger. Ask questions here during our seminars. Lots of ways to contact us. And we know these are difficult times, so bear with us. Have patience with us if we're a little slow to get into you. That sometimes can happen if we're very busy, but we're here for you, and we want to continue to be here for you. So with that being said, I'll get started on our tomato seminar. So this is really exciting, taking a very specific topic and seeing how in-depth we can get into it. I'll basically just be talking about how to grow the best tomatoes in this area. And I've got a lot of different tomatoes and products and different things that I'll show you throughout this. But it's just a great opportunity to grow tomatoes in your yard. If you've never grown anything, grow a tomato. It's so much fun. It's so easy, and you get production, and you get to eat a tomato off the vine. It's so exciting, and there's nothing better than a fresh tomato from your own garden. Trust me. I'm sure you bought tomatoes in the supermarket before, and you just know that when you taste one that's grown in your own garden, there's nothing better than that. So that's what we're going to talk about. The topics that I'm going to try and cover today are location, and we're going to kind of breeze through some of these because some of them are fairly obvious, but again, they're just important kind of tips. So we'll talk about location. We'll talk about soil a little bit, seed versus plant, types of tomatoes, when to plant, how to plant, mulching them if you should or shouldn't, staking your tomatoes, pruning your tomatoes, and then insect and disease prevention and cures, fertilizing and watering. And then, of course, at the end of all of that, you'll be enjoying your harvest. So thanks again for joining us, and we'll get started. So really what I want to talk about first is location. Tomatoes love sun, so you want to give them as much sun as you possibly can. I know sometimes that's difficult if you have a lot of trees in your area or where you want your vegetable garden is in the sunniest location. So let me explain to you what sun means and how much that is. Perfect amount of sun would be somewhere between 6 to 8 hours of sun. And 6 hours of sun is probably the minimum, maybe 5, you could probably get away with it. But sun from 10 to 4 is ideal. That's the hottest part of the sun, where it's kind of directly overhead. So look in your area, look in your yard. If you're growing tomatoes for the first time, look around your yard, look for the sunniest possible location, and that might be the best spot to put your tomato garden or your vegetable garden. But tomatoes can be grown so many different ways, and they're so versatile as well. So you can grow them in raised beds. You can grow them in earth boxes, which I'll show you. You can grow them in pots. You can grow them in hanging baskets, any type of pot, a clay pot, a ceramic pot, a plastic pot. You can grow them in so many different ways. Hanging baskets, I'll show you one that you can grow in a hanging basket. It's really kind of fun. You've even seen probably the upside down tomatoes, which we don't necessarily recommend. That kind of defies nature. Fertilizer works its way down towards the plant, and you really want it to stay in the root system. But if you've got one and you've planted one for years, we used to sell them way back in the day. They're kind of fun. But tomatoes in hanging baskets work the way nature works, which is the plant grows upward and then can spill if that's the case. And the fertilizer stays in the root system rather than kind of the opposite. You can grow them in so many different ways. So let's talk about raised beds. Raised beds, the reason that you do raised beds is the soil temperature warms up more. So it warms up faster, and I'll talk about soil temperature here in a minute. But that's what's so great about raised beds. You get to amend your soil. You get to make your own soil mix. I'll talk about that as we go into the soil portion. But raised beds have a lot of benefits. It keeps it contained, keeps some insects out, keeps the weeds out. And of course, the soil temperature warms up a little bit quicker. And that's the same for pots. If you're growing tomatoes in containers, the soil is going to warm up a little bit faster and you can get started a little bit earlier. And then earth boxes. I don't know if you've ever seen an earth box, but earth boxes are awesome. So this is an earth box right here. So if you've got a small space and you want to do an earth box, then this is an easy way. You can grow 2 tomatoes in this big earth box right here. It comes with everything you need inside. Really, really easy system. This was designed by farmers, so it's really versatile, very easy. You fill it with soil. It's got all the directions. It comes with the fertilizer, the mulching kit, which is kind of a plastic cover that goes over the top, heats up the soil, keeps the weeds and insects out. But this is a very, very easy system to do. So if you've got a small space, a patio that gets a lot of sun, and you want to grow tomatoes and you don't have a lot of yard space, let's say you live in a condo and all you've got is a balcony, this could be a very good option. It also comes with staking kits and casters and wheels so you can move it around. It's got a watering tube so the water goes down to the bottom and works its way up. These are really cool, very easy little kind of kit, all in one. All you need is sun, soil, and a plant and some plants. So earth boxes are great. You can do them in clay pots, plastic pots, and hanging baskets and raised beds, and then of course in your soil. So in your yard, in your ground. Some people even grow them in their landscapes. Sometimes landscapes, are where you're going to get the most sun, and you can grow a couple tomatoes out there amongst your landscape plants. That's perfectly fine and reasonable, and a lot of people are doing it. It's called, foodscaping, as some people might call it. So there's lots of options out there for you. Again, sun is probably the most important thing. Give it as much sun as you possibly can. If you get sun from 12 to 8, fine. If you get sun from 9 to 4, 9 to 2, or 9 to 3, you probably can get away with it. It'll probably help it a little bit if it gets a little bit of shade some point of the day, especially when we get into our summer heats, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. But again, the most sun is the most important, so it can create food for itself and produce that nice big yummy tomato for you to eat. So then let's talk about soil. So soil is very important. I always say invest in your soil because that's where your plant is going to live its entire lifespan. So it's always good to invest in your soil. If you missed our soil seminar, it's a very good seminar. You can go back to our Facebook page, go onto our website, and look up that video. It's a long video all about soil, but I'll just kind of keep it brief. So raised beds, you get to form your own soil. Raised beds, are typically a mixture of topsoil, compost, perlite, peat moss. You can add vermiculite. You can add a lot of different things to it, but you get to make your own mix, and we can help you with that. And I think that's probably the most important thing is if you're confused and you're not quite sure how much soil you're going to need, then come in and see us and let us know your dimensions. Is it 4 by 4 and it's 8 inches deep? We can help you figure out how much soil that is that you're going to need. You can fill it with just potting soil, and that's perfectly fine too. Raised beds are very similar to a container. Now, that's the next point is on containers, hanging baskets, pots, earth boxes. Those need potting soil. You definitely want to use a potting soil. Potting soils are designed for containers, and they're gonna work as they're not gonna dry out. And if they do dry out, they're gonna be easy to get watered and get refreshed again. But potting soils are designed for pots. If you put compost or topsoil in a pot, it's going to become a muddy mess. It's going to clog the drain hole, and then it's going to end up killing your plant. So you definitely use a potting soil. If you ever see a product called garden soil, which of course we don't sell here, we're going to recommend compost instead. But if you've got garden soil, you want to use that. That's for in-ground soil amendment, which is the next topic. So when you go to plant in your yard and you're going to plant in your soil, you want to amend your soil because your soil might be lacking some nutrients. It might be too wet, might be too sandy. So there's a lot of different things you can do there. So clay soil is typically what we're dealing with in this area. You want to break that up with compost and perlite. Perlite are those little white styrofoamy things you see in potting soil. Very, very important thing. Helps airflow, helps water percolate down through the soil. So good to add some perlite, compost, and your soil. We always say a great mixture would be 1/3 of your soil, 1/3 of compost, and 1/3 of perlite. It's a very easy kind of recommendation and easy to remember. So as you're doing your yard, if you're going to till it all in, you can do that. If you're redoing your entire your vegetable garden, you can till in all the soil, and that way all your soil is treated, or you can just amend the hole. And I'll talk about that a little bit when we talk about how to plant them. So that's kind of the main things about soil, is potting soil for pots and earth boxes and hanging baskets. And then for your raised beds, you get to make your own soil, but you can also just buy a raised bed mix. You can also just buy different types of soils and make your own mix. And maybe you want to experiment and use mushroom compost, which we carry, cow manure, different types of compost, different types of soils. And you can do a lot of different ratios, and you can kind of play with it through the years. Once you've got your raised beds filled, then you're ready to roll. And then, of course, amending your soil in the ground. So those are the most important things there with soil. To do it, invest a little bit in your soil. It'll benefit you in the long run. Okay, so then seed versus plant. Seeds are a little low in supply right now. We're supposed to be getting some this week. But seed companies have a hard time dealing with this influx in people growing their own food. So be patient with that. If you want to get seed, we're getting it in as quickly as we can. But seed is a great way of starting. But there's also plants. I mean, I'm going to go through some of my favorite plants here, but you can buy just a starter plant just like this. These are awesome. They're very easy. And I always tell people planting is important. So if you're going to grow from seed and you buy a pack of tomato seeds and it's got 20, 30, 50 seeds in it, do you need that many tomato plants? And do you want to deal with maybe the chance of failure? And that's a possibility there. So think about your family and think about how many tomato plants you actually need. Tomato seeds will last throughout the years. Keep them in a cool, dark place. But germination will definitely go down over the years. So the longer you have that seed, the longer that the worse the germination rate is going to get. So think about that. I mean, if you only need 4 tomatoes, you got 4 people in your family, you want to grow a cherry tomato, a regular tomato, a plum tomato, all the different types of tomatoes, an heirloom. I'll talk about those. I'll talk about everything here. But if you want to grow a tomato, or 4 or 3, then you might not need a whole packet of seeds. And in the packet of seeds, you're going to get one type of tomato, and you're going to get a bunch of them. But if you got a bigger garden and you're growing for your family and you're growing for your neighbors and your friends, then great. Seeds are a great way of doing that, and you can start them early and you can get them in the ground. But I love the seed. I love these starter plants. You get a bigger selection. You get the success. You know it's growing. You know it's there, and it's much easier to start. So again, kind of personal preference, but planning is very important. Don't grow too much, because then you'll end up throwing away food, and there's nothing worse than saying, oh, I can't even eat all this. So think about your space. Think about your garden. Think about how much you actually need. Types of tomatoes. So, okay, here's the biggest one. Types of tomatoes. This is kind of tricky. A lot of people don't know this, but determinate versus indeterminate tomatoes. That's probably one of the most common questions that we get about tomatoes, is which and what does one mean versus the other. So let's start with determinate tomatoes. Determinate tomatoes are going to grow to a certain size, a determined size. So typically around 3 to 4 feet. Which is a nice bushy. You're going to see a lot of, if you see tomatoes called like Better Bush, I'll show you Better Bush. Better Bush is going to get a certain size. You're usually going to see bush in the name, but determinate tomatoes are going to get a certain size, 3 to 4 feet typically, and then they're going to set fruit. They're going to bear all their fruit, and you're going to harvest it within a 1 to 2 week period. But that's great. Really important for if you're growing in containers. If you've just got a clay pot and you want to grow a tomato in it, look at the bush varieties. You're going to get a fair amount of tomatoes. They're all going to come within a 1 to 2 week period, but that's okay. You get a lot of tomatoes in a short time frame, but you can conserve them. You can make sauces. You can do different things with them. So tomatoes, determinate tomatoes are very good. A lot of people love Roma tomatoes. Romas are awesome for sauces. I'm going to show you the Roma here in a minute when we go through the different types. But Roma tomatoes are determinate. They're going to form their bush, and then they're going to set fruit, and you're going to get a lot of them. And the reason you get a lot of them is so if you want to make a sauce, you have a lot of tomatoes to work with. If you want to make a salsa, you have a lot of tomatoes to work with. So determinate tomatoes are great, and you can plant them throughout the season. So, you might plant a Better Bush or a Roma, and then 2 or 3 or 4 weeks later, you might plant another one, and then another one. And then that way you're getting a batch of tomatoes throughout the season, and determinate are very easy. I'm going to talk about staking. Determinate tomatoes, a tomato cage works great for that. It's going to contain it. It's going to keep it up. It's going to keep it manageable, and that's easy to do. Indeterminate tomatoes. So indeterminate are going to continue to grow and continue to produce tomatoes all throughout the entire season. So they get somewhere between 6 and 10 feet tall, so they can get pretty large. So it depends on your soil, depends on Mother Nature, depends on a lot of different things, fertilizer, water, all those different things, which I'll talk about. But indeterminate tomatoes produce consistently throughout the entire growing season. So important to know those differences. You're going to see as I talk about our tomato plants here, our Chef Jeff tomatoes, they all are labeled and they'll tell you whether they're indeterminate or determinate. And I definitely recommend doing a mix. If you've got some space, do a mix. Do some indeterminate and do some determinate tomatoes. But do what works best for you too. So again, a little bit of planning goes a long way. So think about that as well. But that's one of the most common questions is what does that mean? And should I not buy determinate? Should I not buy indeterminate? Depends on your situation, depends on what you want, depends on why you're growing the tomatoes. So think about all those things and have those questions ready for us. But I always do a mix, a couple indeterminate, couple determinate. And then if I'm doing determinate, sometimes I think about those might be a great option for seed because you can get the seed and you can plant it throughout the season. But just kind of think about those different opportunities there. And then you can plan, and planning goes a long way when you just do a little bit of that planning. All right, so now I'm going to talk about some tomatoes that I pulled. These are just some of my favorites and some of our favorites. You're going to see the Chef Jeff label here on all these tomatoes. I'm going to pull these and show them to you. So we'll just kind of go through some of my favorites and some of what you're going to see a lot in the store. We have a bunch of different varieties right now. It's a great time to come in and check out all the different types of tomatoes we have. But I'll start with Better Boy. I think Better Boy is probably one of the most well-known tomatoes out there. Better Boy, and if you ever see that logo on our Chef Jeff, let me see if I can get my finger out of the way. That AAS, that's an all-American selection. That means that it's proven to do very well. You're also going to see this on all the labels, GMO-free. So these are not genetically modified. They are hybrids. Which hybrids, are basically, taking two tomatoes and getting the best characteristics out of both. But Better Boy is one of the classics. I definitely recommend if you're just going to do one tomato, do a Better Boy. Better Boys produce consistently. They're easy. You're not going to get that huge whopper, that gigantic hamburger sliced tomato, but you're going to get a lot of 8 to 16 ounce tomatoes. They're going to be very easy to grow, and they produce reliably throughout the season. They have a lot of disease and insect resistance. So very, very good tomato. Definitely one of my recommendations. If anybody's ever like, well, I just need one tomato, I always go to Better Boy. And then I'll show you Better Bush next, which might be another good option. But also, if you look at your back of your tag here, the back of the tag is going to give you a bunch of information. And you see that right down there, that indeterminate right there off my finger. But it's also going to tell you a lot of different things about like maturity, how long it's going to take to get to maturity, how long it's going to take to get to the point where it's producing a consistent crop for you. But this is a great tomato, Better Boy, one of my favorites. Definitely recommend that. All right, so the next one, like I said, was Better Bush. Better Bush is a really, really good variety. It's an it's a determinate variety, so this one's going to be great for containers. If you look at that stem right there, look how thick that stem is already. Just a small little plant, you got that nice bushy, stalky stem, and that's going to be great because it's going to stay nice and full. And squatty, and only, like I said, get to 3 to 4 feet tall, and then continue to produce all of its fruit there in a 1 to 2 week time frame. But Better Bush, very easy variety again, kind of off the Better Boy variety. Better Bush, very, very easy. You're going to get some nice tomatoes out of this, some good slicing tomatoes, some good salad tomatoes. So really, really good one. Better Bush is a great determinate variety. And then Early Girl. Early Girl is probably one of the most popular because it sets fruit early. So it's going to start to set fruit pretty early. It's an indeterminate, so it's going to continue to grow and produce throughout the season, but it's one of the fastest ones to get to a fruit. It gets about a 6 ounce fruit. It's a good quality tomato, but a lot of people love Early Girl because you get an early crop of tomatoes and they start to set fruit pretty quickly. So Early Girl is another good option. And these are probably a lot of y'all probably heard of a lot of these names. Heirloom varieties. I pulled a couple heirlooms. This is one of my favorites, Cherokee Purple. Heirloom varieties are basically seeds that have been passed down through the generations, usually over 50 years. And so heirloom tomatoes are going to give you a lot of versatility or a lot of difference. So you're going to see like this one's got purple coloring. You get different tastes. You get tangy, you get sweet, you get that kind of old world flavor. But these are really fun. Been in our area or been in people growing them from seed for a long time. And that's the other thing is with this produces seed, it'll actually produce a cherry tomato a Cherokee Purple tomato. So you can actually take the seeds at the end of the year and use them for next year. And that's kind of the idea behind heirloom. If you get a Better Bush tomato or a Better Boy and you take the seed, you're not going to get a Better Boy tomato because, again, they've been hybridized. But heirloom tomatoes, you can. But heirloom tomatoes are awesome. You're going to get a lot of assortment. You're going to get a lot of different types, a lot of different tastes. So check out Heirlooms. Cherokee Purple just happens to be one of my favorites. Very, very cool with that purple color and just something different, great in salads and on sandwiches. All right, and then next is Celebrity. Celebrity is also one of those AAS winners. Really, really good variety. This is a indeterminate variety as well, but Celebrity is one of the best because it produces fairly early as well. So one of those other ones that people love. It's a very classic tomato, kind of in the better boy line as reliability goes. So Celebrity, a very popular one, really easy to grow. Great, again, looking for that logo, that AAS logo, really helps. Those are very high quality tomatoes. All right, let's see what else we got here. Grape tomatoes. Grape tomatoes are just slightly longer cherry tomatoes. Really, really popular. A lot of people grow these. They're also come in a yellow one, so you can get these in a couple different varieties. But grape tomatoes, people love grape tomatoes. They are indeterminate, so they're going to grow and get fairly large. But people love grape tomatoes. They're very easy. Smaller tomatoes means they produce more, and you're going to get more, and you're going to have a lot of yield out of it, and they're usually easier to grow. All right, here's a cool one. This one's called Husky Red Cherry. Look at that plant right there. You can see that nice thick stalk, how sturdy that plant is, and how many leaves it's producing already, how many branches it's got. So Husky Red Cherry is obviously a determinate variety. It's going to grow to a certain size, but you're going to get some cherries, and it's great for containers. Very easy to grow in containers. If you ever buy like a patio tomato, I'm going to show you one here in a minute, but this might be what you get in a cherry patio tomato. So this is called Husky Red Cherry, really kind of a cool one, lots of fun, get a lot of cherries, all in about a 1 to 2 week period. And then, your plant's going to kind of dwindle off. But Husky Red Cherry is a really, really cool variety. Another heirloom is Mr. Stripey. So I just grabbed that one just because Mr. Stripey shows it's got that different coloration. So if you can see that, let me see if I can get it close to the camera. But Mr. Stripey is an heirloom tomato, been passed down through the generations. Again, just kind of a different look. There's Mortgage Lifter, Brandywine. There's a couple other different varieties. So heirlooms are just kind of cool. They're fun. Again, usually indeterminate. They're going to get, continue to grow and set fruit throughout the entire growing season. But a really kind of cool one. I just grabbed that one just to show you. All right, and then we'll show you the Roma. So as I mentioned earlier, Romas, very, very popular for people that are creating sauces for pasta dishes or salsas. As you can see, there's salsarific on the tag. But Roma tomatoes are very, very popular. Again, determinate. You're going to get a lot of them in about a 1 to 2 week period, but very easy to grow. Roma is an awesome one. I definitely recommend these a lot. Very easy to grow, and a lot of tomatoes in one point. And these are going to be that kind of longer, what they call plum tomatoes. So Roma is a very, very good one. I'm going to try and roll through these a little bit more so we can get past this. But Sun Gold is my favorite. So I grow a Sun Gold every year. So easy to grow because they get this yellow color. They don't have to ripen to that red. It doesn't take quite as long. And you just get loads and loads of them. I mean, and they are like candy. If you're out working in your garden and it's hot outside and you've grown a Sun Gold, there's nothing better than just growing and picking a couple of these off the vine and just throwing them in your mouth. And they're so easy. And you get lots of them, and the kids love them. Everybody loves them. This is one of my favorite go-to cherry tomatoes. So Sun Gold, definitely try this if you got space. It does get big, indeterminate, going to continue to grow, gets pretty large, but is an awesome, awesome cherry tomato, one of my favorites. And then, of course, the most reliable and everybody loves Super Sweet 100. Super Sweet 100 is a very common cherry tomato, a red cherry tomato, very easy to grow. One of our favorites and classics. There's lots and lots of different types of cherry tomatoes out there. There's some that get black. There's some that say yellow. There's the red ones. As I showed you, the Sun Gold. Lots and lots of different varieties out there. Try some. Do definitely, if you're going to grow 4 tomatoes, grow a cherry tomato. Grow one variety because cherry tomatoes you're just going to get a lot of tomatoes. They're going to be real fun. You can go out, pick a bowl of them, throw them in your salad. Super, super easy to do. Or just have them as a snack when you're working in the yard. I love cherry tomatoes, but Super Sweet 100, one of the most popular varieties for sure. It's like sugar. It's awesome. And then I'll show you the Whopper here. So Whopper, so then you got your big guys. I didn't grab a lot of them. There's so many of them. Beefmaster, Big Beef, Beef Steak, Whopper, Big Boy. I mean, they go on and on. The list goes on and on. Now, these are big tomatoes. So this is going to get, a big, thick hamburger slicing tomato, the hand size. So if you're growing tomatoes for a competition to see how big you can grow one, then look at some of these big guys. Whopper, Big Boy, very, very good varieties. Again, that's premium label. If you ever see the premium, it means it's a little bit of a higher end tomato. But you're not going to get as many tomatoes with a big tomato plant or with a big tomato. It takes a lot of energy to form that tomato. So, just know that, and going into it, that's why I always say do a better boy, because you're not going to get huge tomatoes, but you're going to get a lot of them. And then if you want to try some big ones, there's a lot of choices out there. People love them. They're so much fun. And when you get that big hamburger sliced tomato where you just need one slice on your big hamburger, or you make BLTs a lot, these are awesome tomatoes. One tomato, is a meal. So there's a lot of them to choose from. They are indeterminate varieties, so they can continue to grow typically. Most all your big ones are. And a lot of these have been chosen for disease resistance. But Whopper is a good one. Lots of choices there, so think about those. And then my last one, as I mentioned, a lot of people are probably like, hanging baskets, I've never heard of. This is a great one. This is called Sweet and Neat Cherry Red Tomato. So you can already see, look at that, it's blooming. It's already starting to form blooms, which means it's already starting to set some fruit here. So again, a determinate variety. It's going to stay fairly small. Great in hanging baskets because tomatoes are vines. I'm going to talk about that here in a minute, but tomatoes are vines. So this is going to actually start to trail over the side of a hanging basket if that's what you want. But these are awesome in hanging baskets. Easy to grow in pots. Amazing in containers. Really great for in the ground too. So all of these determinate varieties like Better Bush and stuff like that, and the Husky Red Cherry and Sweet and Neat are great in the garden too, because they form a nice stalky plant. You can throw a tomato cage on it and you're done. But this is another cool variety. So Sweet and Neat Cherry Red, really, really cool. All right, so there's just some of my favorites. Again, there's lots and lots of different choices out there. So don't think that this is it. We've got probably, I don't even know right now, but we've probably got 40 different varieties out there. And we have a lot of these varieties at our Great Neck location, as well as at all of our markets. So you can check out any of those at any of those locations. All right, so now we've talked about types of tomatoes. Spent a little bit of time on that. So then I'm going to just kind of run through some different techniques and tips. When to plant. So right now is not a bad time to plant. We're getting there. Soil temperatures need to be at 60 degrees. And so soil temperature is hard to gauge. It's hard to know what the soil temperature is. You can actually go online and just type in soil temperature in my area, and you'll get a pretty close estimate. You can also, because we're so close to the water, you can look at the bay temperature. Usually our bay temperature right now is about 61, 62 degrees, and the soil temperature is going to be a little bit behind that. So you might look at, we're probably somewhere in the 58, 59 degree range right now. So we're getting close to the soil temperature being right, which means you still got time. I usually used to plant my tomatoes on May 1st. We just had a pretty chilly night last night. So, you got plenty of time. Don't worry about stressing I don't have any space for those. I got to get my tomatoes in right now. You got plenty of time. Plan, prepare, get ready, invest in your soil, and then pick out your plants. So soil temperature is important. If you do plant early, let's say you planted them 2 or 3 weeks ago, and you're a little worried, then hey, maybe I started early. It's okay. Your tomatoes should be fine. Tomato plants, when they're planted in cooler temperature soils, usually just sit there. They're not going to grow much. So if you've been like, man, I planted my tomatoes 3 weeks ago and they haven't grown much, that's just because the soil temperature is not warmed up. Usually the tomato plant's going to be just fine. So don't worry if you did plant your tomatoes already. You might see some spotting on the leaves from cold damage. That's okay. I'm going to talk about pruning here in a second. That's okay. Now, your typical range is you want the nighttime temperatures to be above 50 degrees and your daytime temperatures to be above 60 degrees. So that's kind of your consistent range. Now, if you bought your tomatoes and you still got them in these little pots, that's okay. They can stay in there for a little bit longer. Maybe you bring them in and out of the garage at night just to kind of get them acclimated and make sure they don't get stunted or hurt by that cold weather. But if you go ahead and plant them, you're still going to be okay too. You just might not see a lot of growth right now. That's where raised beds come into play. Right? Why people do raised beds or plant them in containers or above ground is because the soil temperature is going to warm up so much faster than our in-ground temperature. But know that that's just a good kind of tip, is to know your soil temperature. Don't worry. Take your time. Get out there. You got time. May 1st, May 15th. You got plenty of time to get out there and get your garden prepared and get your tomatoes in the ground. You don't have to stress about getting it done this weekend. If you want to get it done, you got plenty. All right, so then how to plant. Now this is there's a lot of theories out there. A lot of you have probably tried different things. But you can plant them a lot of different ways. So the first one is, you plant it just level with the ground. And that's what I recommend. It's super easy. You just take it, you put this soil level right with your soil level, plant it like you would normally plant anything. Probably one of the most common mistakes in all of gardening, especially beginners, is they plant plants too deep. So they plant it up here. They think, oh, that'll make it sturdier. Most plants can't take that, but tomatoes can. So if you take an azalea and you plant it too deep, it's probably going to die. So for general purpose, for general knowledge, always plant your plants level with the ground. You can even plant them a little bit higher if you wanted to keep it safe. But for tomatoes, you can actually plant them deeper. So there's 3 different types of ways that I know of planting tomatoes. One is level, like I just mentioned. The other one is deeper. So let me show you on that Whopper, because it's a little bit easier to show you on this bigger tomato. But on this Whopper tomato right here, you can plant it all the way up to here if you want to. And it'll send roots out of here. And so what a lot of people say is that that will create a deeper root system. So there is a different way of planting them. So what you would do there is you would dig your hole bigger and deeper for sure. And I definitely would recommend that. So if we're amending just the hole around the tomato, dig it a little bit bigger, dig it a little bit deeper, take the soil out, throw some compost, throw some perlite into it, throw some fertilizer. I'll talk about fertilizer here in a minute. Throw all that in there, mix it up real good, put it back in the hole, and then dig your hole again and plant it if you're going to plant it level. If you're going to plant it deeper, taking all that soil out and amending it is going to help you dig a deeper hole. So you can plant this. What you would do is just take these bottom leaves off, these bottom branches off, just take them and snip them off. And then you would just plant it about an inch from the lowest branch. So this is now you're going to be your lowest branch here. And then you just plant it right about there. So after you take off all these other branches. So that is a possibility. You can do that. You don't have to. But some people do recommend it because all of this is going to root. And you've got this root down here, and you're going to develop that nice, big, deep root system. Again, don't have to. It's your personal preference, however you want to do it. But that is how some people do it. Now, you can also do it laying them down, which a lot of people don't know that. But you can take this tomato, lay it down like this, stake it up like that, and plant it in the ground horizontally. And what that's going to do is send out roots all along the stem, and you're going to get a wider root system. So again, you can get a deeper root system, you can get a wider root system, or you can plant it level. So you got 3 different techniques there. You can experiment with them and try it different ways. If you want to just be safe and not sorry and you don't want to try anything new, just plant it level. Super easy. That's completely normal and completely safe. But there's 3 different ways that you can actually plant tomatoes. A lot of people have, their grandparents taught them how to plant tomatoes, and maybe that's how they planted them, and that's fine. But tomatoes are one of the only plants. I mean, there's some other plants out there. But the tomatoes are one of the only plants that are a little bit more fail-safe. So if you happen to bury your tomato plant, you're going to be okay because it's going to root throughout that entire stem. So that's how you can plant tomatoes. So different types of techniques there on how to plant them. All right, so now mulching. Mulching is a kind of another theory. Some people don't believe in it. Some people do. I definitely do. I think mulching significantly will help your tomato plants and your vegetable garden in general. What it does is it warms up your soil in cool temperatures. So when we've had these cool nights, it will keep that soil temperature nice and warm. And then during our hot summers, it'll keep it nice and cool. So it works both ways. It helps decrease the fluctuation in temperatures that are happening above ground and below ground. And when you have a fluctuation of temperature above ground and your soil temperature is consistent, meaning it's not going to drop real quick at night, it's not going to raise real quick during the day, then it keeps it nice and consistent, keeps your root system at least consistent, because you can't control the top necessarily, but you can control the soil temperature, and mulch helps that. Moisture, it also helps retain moisture, so when we get really hot, it's going to keep the moisture in. It's also going to keep the weeds out. It's also going to help with keeping splashing from dirt. I'm going to talk about that when we talk about pruning. But it keeps the dirt from splashing on the leaves. So mulching is awesome, especially if you're growing like squash or watermelons or something like that. Keeps your fruit and your vegetables off the ground. So I definitely recommend mulching. Mulching typically in this area, if you're using a hardwood mulch, a pine bark mulch, any of those, it's going to bring your pH down. So do realize that. Pine straw, all of those products are going to bring, all of those mulches are going to bring your pH down. And we do free pH tests. I didn't mention that yet, but I'm going to mention here in a second. But pH is very important. But just know that if you mulch, that you're probably going to need to lime or use Magical. I'm going to talk about those there in a minute. But that is kind of what you might want to do to kind of help keep the soil temperature right, keep moisture in, keep weeds out. It really, really does help. I really think it's a major benefit. Some people don't believe in it, and that's fine. I just typically recommend mulching. I really think it does help. So now staking your tomatoes. So staking your tomatoes, lots of different options out there. You might have some old techniques that you've been using for years. That's great. Of course, you got your tomato cages here. So I always use tomato cages on all my tomatoes. There's lots of different styles out there. I like the heavy duty ones. So this is a nice thick gauge. So it's not going to, warp or get all bent up when you push it in the ground. Lots of different things you can do with these. You can actually bend the legs to make them easier to put in pots. You can use wire cutters and cut these to make them shorter if you need to put them in a container. But tomato cages are awesome. They come in colorful cages now, so you brighten up your vegetable garden. But tomato cages, put them on early. That's my best advice. As soon as you plant your tomatoes, go ahead and put them on, because as we warm up, the tomato is going to start to grow fast. And when you get a large tomato, it's very difficult to get a cage over the top of it. So start them early, and I put a cage on every tomato. And then as we talk about the indeterminate varieties, then you might need to add additional staking. So tomato cages are very easy. Definitely use them. Put them on each of your tomatoes when you first start your plants and get them in the garden. Very easy to use. We do have a new one called the Ultimato, so this might be something you've maybe seen before. We haven't carried it in a few years, but Ultimato is kind of a cool system. You basically get three stakes here, and then you get these clips. And these clips right here allow you to clip and change the size of, or the containment of the tomato. So as you work up, you can actually work these clips up. And this is a nice, 4.5 foot tall staking system, very easy. Again, great for your kind of determinate tomatoes. Indeterminate are going to eventually outgrow this, and you might need a bigger staking system. But kind of a cool new way of doing it, very easy, because you can take the bottom ones off as it gets bigger and move them up to the top. So you get a nice kind of the versatility of the alt tomato cage. So another option there to try for staking your tomatoes. All right, so then the other option would be, of course, your larger stakes. Let me see if I can reach over here and grab these. So, of course, you got your hardwood, your nice big hardwood 6-foot stakes. So as your indeterminate varieties get bigger and outgrow the tomato cage, then you might need a bigger staking system. And there's lots of different options out there. We've got the metal plastic-coated stakes, bamboo stakes. I mean, these are very versatile. You can get a pack of bamboo stakes. These are both 6 feet tall. So this will get you that height that you kind of need. Hammer them into the ground a little bit. And this gives you the ability to stake your tomatoes up above that tomato cage. So think about that. Think about your staking options. You're definitely going to need to stake your indeterminate varieties as you continue to see those grow up and get bigger and bigger. And then how do you tie them on there? I think that's kind of one of the most asked questions is how do I even tie them to my stakes or to my tomato cage? And we definitely recommend that because you want to keep them sturdy, and you don't want to get them bending over the top of the tomato cage. So this is my favorite. This is a stretch tie. We sell it. It's super, super easy to use. It stretches. And what you want to do with that is the stretching allows the plant to grow. So if the plant grows, it'll stretch with the tape will stretch with it. So it's not going to harm the plant. If you use twist ties, then you just got to give yourself enough space so that as that tomato gets bigger and bigger, as that girth gets bigger and bigger, it doesn't bite into the plant and hurt it and cause damage. So this stretch tie is awesome. It's a 150-foot roll. I mean, I think I still might have my original roll that I bought like 15 years ago, 17 years ago. But I love this stuff. It's so easy to use. You just rip off a piece. So you just say, okay, I need about this much. You just rip it off. You don't need to cut it. And then you can use that to tie on there. Some people might use pieces of fabric from around the house. Old pantyhose you can use. There's lots of different options. If you need something to use around your home, you got probably lots of choices there. Twine is okay. Anything that's not going to stretch with the plant, you just want to make sure to tie it loosely so that it supports it, but it still allows the plant to grow. So that's kind of the most important thing there. All right, so that's kind of staking them. Lots of different options out there, lots of different types of cages, lots of different types of stakes, but just know that your indeterminate varieties are going to get fairly large, and you want to be able to keep those up and off the ground. So now is a great time to kind of talk about that. Tomatoes are vines. So tomatoes are a natural vine. The indeterminate or the determinate varieties, your bush varieties that stay nice and stalky and kind of big, or only get to a certain size, those are still vines. They've just been hybridized to stay that small and to form tomatoes in a 1 to 2 week period. Your indeterminate varieties are vines. So if you didn't stake those, they would crawl on the ground. They would run all over the ground. They would probably get diseased very quickly and easily because there's not a lot of airflow. And then the tomatoes are going to form on the ground, and you're probably going to have a lot of insects get into them. A lot of different animals can get to them a lot easier. And so you're going to cause a lot of problems. So definitely you need to stake them. I mean, we do that. If tomatoes grew naturally as a vine on the ground, then what would happen is the root system actually, because as I mentioned earlier, when you plant tomatoes, the root system would actually root into the ground along there, and you wouldn't require as much water. So when we talk about water, and I'll talk about that as well, because we need to grow tomatoes up off the ground to keep the fruit safe and keep the insect and disease issues at a minimum, then the root system's not going to be as big. So you might have to water a little bit more, but it's going to get you more yield and more tomatoes. So just know that tomatoes are vines, but they're not a twining vine. So it's not like a cucumber where it's going to send out the little tendril and wrap onto something and hold on and work its way up. It's just a natural vining on the ground type of plant. So it's not going to crawl through a trellis. Now you can grow them on some sort of trellis system, especially cherry tomatoes, very easy to do. You just have to work them in and out of that trellis. So as it's growing up, we're tying it to it helps as well. Just make sure it's sturdy and in the ground, because that thing will get very front heavy If you're not working it through and you're just tying it to the front side, then that trellis can tend to lean over. So that's kind of a little tip that a lot of people don't maybe know. Tomatoes are vines. All right, so pruning your tomatoes. Don't have to do this. This is not a necessary step. There's a couple things that I think are a little bit more necessary, but not a necessity. So definitely going back to the determinate variety, you probably don't need to prune them much at all. Determinate varieties, you're going to get a certain size. In fact, if you prune them, you're actually probably going to be eliminating some of the fruit or some of the production that you're going to get in that 1 to 2 week period. So I typically say don't prune your determinate varieties, except for one little tip that I'll share you in a minute. Indeterminate varieties, I definitely recommend doing a little bit of pruning. Now we're in a transition zone, so it's again kind of up to you as to whether you want to do it. Pruning will eliminate some of the excess vegetative growth. However, when we get very hot, if you have a lot of sun scald can be a problem. And if your tomato is very open and free, which I think is good, you could experience some sun scald. And sun scald is when the tomato kind of gets this leathery looking patch. And that happens because it's not getting any protection from an all-day sun environment. But let me show you this tomato. I've got this nice large tomato right here. So let me see if you can see that. So this is kind of that patio tomato I mentioned earlier. So this is a determinate variety. But I can show you on this some of the techniques that I'm talking about. So this is one thing that I definitely recommend is pruning your tomatoes up. So forming them into a little tree. You can go somewhere between 12, 18, 24 inches up off the ground. What that does is improve air quality, which is #1 key for keeping disease and fungus out and those types of issues that can occur. And so the #1 step would be pruning off your lower branches. So if you see this variety here, I'm just going to take this and I'm just going to snip off these lower branches just for now, just to kind of show you that technique. So all you got to do is just kind of snip those off, get rid of any debris. And a lot of times you're going to see your lower branches are going to turn kind of yellow and nasty anyways because of that soil splashing thing that I mentioned. So if soil splashes up on the bottom of the leaves, your branches are going to turn nasty anyways. And so it's better just to take those off because it'll stop the spread of any kind of disease or fungus. So take them off kind of early as the plants continue to grow up, form that tree. The next step would be the next group of branches here, taking those up. If this were in the ground, in a tomato cage or in a container like this, I wouldn't do this. But in my vegetable garden, I definitely recommend it. All my tomatoes look like little tiny trees. They're all limbed up about 12, 18, 24 inches. And that keeps the soil from splashing on the leaves and helps force the growth up to the top and keeps the airflow all the way around the plant, which I think is super, super important. So there's one pruning technique. The next one is these suckers, so tomato suckers. I don't know if I can get the camera to really see this. Let's see if I can do this. Okay, so, and there's a very good example right there at the top. So there's your sucker right there. That's a big one. But here's a little one. So this is where we want to get them. Let's see if I can see that. There you go. See that little sucker right there? So this little piece of growth right here. So you got your branch, you got your main stem here, then you got your branch coming off, and this is a tomato sucker. So now on a determinate variety, which is this, you wouldn't do this. But on an indeterminate variety, then you would want to do this. And this is just going in and just pinching it out. Now, if they get bigger like this one up here, you can go and prune it out. So this is, as you can see, this bigger one here. This is your main stem, sucker right here, branch. So you got the branch growing out this way, main stem, sucker has gotten pretty big. Now, again, this is a determinate, so I'm not going to do it to this one. But if it was an indeterminate variety, then I might take that one out. Because ultimately what you want on an indeterminate variety is a nice big single stalk. Now, again, you don't have to. And sometimes people just let them go, and that's perfectly fine. It's completely fine. But every once in a while, you might go in there and thin it out. That really will help with keeping the disease at a minimum because that creates airflow. It allows sunlight to get into the entirety of the plant, allows all the leaves to form, go through photosynthesis and produce food for the root system. So very important to kind of do some pruning techniques here and there. And we can always answer those questions for you. So determinate, don't necessarily need to prune. Indeterminate, definitely a little selective pruning here and there. Again, I love pruning. It kind of puts me in that zen mood. So if you're stressed out, go out there and play in your vegetable garden and prune some of your tomatoes. Prune them up to help improve airflow, and then also thin them out a little bit to allow sunlight and allow more airflow as well. Another great tip for that is disinfecting your pruners, especially if you think you might have a disease or a fungus forming, especially on those lower branches if soil splashed up on them. Disinfect your pruners. It's a very important practice to try and get used to because if you prune this tomato, then you move on to another tomato, and this one had a disease and you're not aware of it yet, then when you move to the next tomato, you're going to transfer that disease. Very easy to disinfect them. Just use some rubbing alcohol. Mouthwash actually works. And just take, and I usually put in a little spray bottle, a little mister or something, and then just spray my pruners after each cut. So I'll disinfect right before, and then after each cut, I just take it and spray it, and then prune. Spray it, prune it. Now you can work on just one plant and then disinfect before your next plant. It's up to you, but I usually disinfect after each prune. Why not? And you just get used to it. Another tip is just to have a cup of rubbing alcohol there, and then just take your pruners after you make a cut and just dip them in, and you're good. You can go prune. So you can kind of keep up the pace with that. All right, so that's pruning. Insect and disease. That's a major topic. I don't want to get too much involved in that. What I will always say about disease and insect issues is prevention is always better than curative. So try and prevent rather than be curative. There's lots of different things out there, lots of organic solutions that you can use. We carry a lot of them. Neem oil from Natural Guard, completely organic, completely safe. Spinosad soap, which is an insecticidal soap with spinosad in it. So that's a great one. We've got the caterpillar killer. So if you ever have any caterpillar issues, that's another good one. That's a organic product as well. We've got our Bee Safe 3-in-1 garden spray. Really, really good. Safe for the bees. And then we've got copper soap fungicide, which is another organic fungicide. And then we've got, just your traditional broad spectrum fungicide. There's a lot of different products, a lot of different things that I can tell you. So what I will tell you is my favorite, triple action. So triple action is OMRI listed. It contains neem oil. It's got pyrethrin in it. So it's a great insecticide, fungicide, miticide. It's kind of a cure-all. So it's going to do kind of everything. And it's a great thing just to have around the house. I always say have a bottle of triple action around your house, because if you don't know what the problem is, then this is probably going to help cure it. It's a great thing to have around the house. If you can't get into us and get something specific for the problem that you have, this is a great one. It's a great preventative measure as well. So you can spray this every 7 to 10 days. You can spray it up to the day of harvest. So it's a great one to have. Triple action, I definitely recommend it. So I would try this one. But triple action you can spray as they're young plants to kind of prevent fungus and diseases forming. You can also help for the insects. So use triple action. I definitely recommend this one. Use it all over your yard. It's awesome. But triple action, you should have a bottle in your home. And if you ever have issues with disease, fungus, or insect issues, then come and see us. If you can bring a sample in, great. Inspect your garden. That's kind of my other best advice. Is just kind of go through and inspect it. If you're doing some of those pruning techniques I talked about, and you're letting those pruned pieces fall into the ground, get rid of them. Insects can hide under them. Diseases might be on those leaves, and then they can transfer into the soils. There's lots of different types of wilts. There's lots of different types of diseases out there. It's hard to list them all and name them all and go through all of them right now in a short seminar. But there's a lot of them out there. If you get them, if you've got a wilt or a disease and you just don't think your plant is performing well and you can sacrifice it, I would say definitely get rid of it, throw it away, start a new one, and maybe start it in a different location, because a lot of times the wilts are in the soil. So bring in a sample to us, bring in a little Ziploc bag, and we can hopefully identify what the issue is. If it's something we can cure, we'll recommend a cure. If it's not, we're going to tell you might have to scrap that plant and start over again. But that's okay. Tomatoes grow pretty quickly and they're pretty easy to grow. But a lot of these varieties that I talked about earlier are going to be very disease and resistant, and so that's why we recommend them. So again, insect and disease could be a whole another hour-long seminar, and I don't want to talk about all of them right now. Just go out there, inspect your garden for insects, check the undersides of the leaves, check the top of the leaves. Mites are very small. White flies, aphids, you might have a lot of these things, and we've got a lot of solutions that'll work for those. Triple action helps with a lot of them. Pruning up your plants helps airflow. So a lot of different things you can do, but spend some time in the garden. I usually check mine once a week, so I'll go out there once a week and just kind of inspect the plants, look real close, look on the undersides of the leaves, and then that way I can help determine if I've got any insect issues. And then I might get super specific if I've got something specific that I need to tackle. You can come ask us any of those questions. All right, fertilize. Fertilize is another important thing. So I know we're getting kind of to the 50-minute mark here of my talk, but fertilizing is super, super important. I'll just kind of go through some basics. Of course, if we've got our McDonald organic green leaf, really, really great fertilizer. It's got a lot of those smaller elements, smaller trace elements that you don't see in a lot of other fertilizers. So it's got boron and copper and zinc and molybdenum and calcium, which is super important. I'll talk about that in a minute with tomatoes. But we've got lots of different ones. If you're growing a lot of different vegetables, Espoma Garden Tone might be a good option for you. Garden Tone is completely organic, and it works for herbs and all vegetables. So another really good one, another good option. Then you've got your Tomato Tone. Whoops.
So tomato tone is specifically designed for tomatoes, completely organic, completely safe. So maybe you're only growing tomatoes in your vegetable garden this year. Tomato tone might be the choice for you. A lot of these at our Independence and Great Neck location, we carry this size, the 4-pound size at all our markets, but at our Independence and Great Neck location, we have it in 4-pound, 8-pound, and 18-pound. So if you're growing a lot of tomatoes, you might need an 18-pound bag. That bag that just fell off my table here is Biotone Starter. So this is a new product that we've been carrying recently. It's awesome. You've probably seen us talking about it a lot. It's great. It gets the soil microbes activated, and it has a lot of beneficial bacteria and mycorrhizae that attach themselves to the root system of the plant and make it bigger faster. So it's a great starter fertilizer. I definitely recommend mixing this right into the hole when you plant your tomatoes or any plant. It's awesome, awesome, awesome stuff. Really, really helps. Get a bag, again, 4-pound, 8-pound, 18-pound. You got lots of different options and sizes here. But mix this right into the soil right when you plant your plant. So this is a great starter fertilizer. And then, of course, when we talked about pH, there's a couple different options that you got. You've got your traditional garden lime. So garden lime is dolomitic lime. Dolomitic lime takes a little bit of time to break down and takes some time to actually change your pH. So if you're doing this in the fall or earlier in like January, February, great time to change your pH, get your pH to the right level. Then we do pH tests. We do them for free for our Garden Rewards customers. So come in, bring a little small sample. We'll get you to the right pH range for growing tomatoes. But this is a good option if you're doing it early. Now, if you're like me and you're about to plant your tomatoes and you forgot to do this, then you can use Magical. Magical is a fast-acting lime. So it's going to change your pH much quicker. It's going to get you there faster. But what I really love about this one is it's calcium. And calcium helps with that blossom end rot. So if you've ever had the black spot on the bottom of your tomato, then that's usually calcium deficiency. And when your plant is derived with calcium, you can get that black spot fungus. And so when you get that black spot, you need calcium. You can get it in fertilizers. But if you need a little bit of a higher dose, you can get it this way. We also carry a liquid product that you can use. If you need it faster acting, if you've got it and it's actively happening, you can use that to kind of help correct it. But Magical, change your pH really, really fast, and it adds a lot of calcium in your soil. So great for raised beds that are depleted of nutrients, containers. So then let's talk about real quick, how much do I need to fertilize? Well, in containers, you're going to need to fertilize every 3 to 4 weeks. Containers, because of the drain holes and because of all the perlite in the soil, and raised beds, probably about every 4 to 5 weeks. Because your soil is looser and your nutrients are going to work down through the soil faster, so you're going to need to water, or you're going to need to fertilize them about every 3 to 4 weeks for a container with a granular fertilizer. There's liquid feeds out there. Liquid feeds are about every 1 to 2 weeks. So a lot of different choices there, a lot of different options for fertilizer. Again, probably a whole other huge conversation that I could have about fertilizers. But do fertilize. I think that's probably one of the most common mistakes, especially with your indeterminate varieties that are going to continue to produce throughout the entire year. It takes energy to form those fruits, to form those tomatoes, and so you got to provide it with the energy to do that, and you need to keep on fertilizing. So fertilize with Tomato Tone, Garden Tone, McDonald Organic Greenleaf Fertilizer, Biotone Starter. Use some of the lime products to help, but definitely fertilize throughout the entire season. So if I'm going to use my Garden Tone or my McDonald Organic Greenleaf here, so if I'm going to use these products, then I would do it every 5 to 6 weeks in the ground. In a container, I'm going to do it somewhere about every 3 to 4 weeks. And a raised bed everywhere about 4 to 5 weeks. So again, just knowing your soil, how well it's going to go through your soil, but definitely use it. The nice thing is with organics, they're safe, so you can't use usually too much. You're not going to hurt your plant by, if I accidentally dump half this bag on a tomato, I'm not going to kill it. Pull some away, use it, save it for later. But definitely get yourself enough that you can use throughout the entire season, the entire growing season. Don't forget to fertilizer. Put it in your phone. Your smartphone will tell you, go fertilize your garden. It's very, very important. It takes a lot of energy to do this, to produce this fruit and these foods for you, and these vegetables. So continue to fertilize. And then the last tip is watering. Watering is, again, kind of variable. Depends on what's happening in Mother Nature. But my best advice is water deep, less often. That's what I always tell people when you're planting trees, shrubs, perennials, vegetables, anything. Water deep, less often. So you want to water a deeper amount. So you want to water more to get that water down into the root system, and then you want to let it dry out. So you want to do it less often. So right now you might water your vegetables every 4 to 5 days, 3 to 4 days, because we're cool. When we start to warm up, you might go to every 2 to 3 days. But you want to water deep less often. What I love about tomato plants is they're kind of the teller of the garden. They'll tell you if your vegetable garden is dry and needs to be watered, because they wilt fairly quickly. tell you a quick technique about wilting as well. Wilting does not always mean that your plants need water. Wilting will occur on tomato plants in the heat of a very hot day, even if the soil is moist. So if it's a very, very hot day and your soil is moist, and you know your yard is well drained, and you got your best tool right here, your finger, check the soil. If it's moist and your tomato plants are wilting, they're just doing it to protect themselves. So they're doing it, they're shutting their leaves down, they're closing up so that they don't have to take as much sun and as much abuse as that hot day is giving them. So don't be too concerned about wilting. Now, what wilting will do is tell you if your garden is dry. And if you check the soil and it's dry, great time to water. Let your plants go to a somewhat of a wilting point, because what is happening is as that plant is starting to wilt a little bit, the root system is searching for water. And as that root system searches for water, that's how you get a deeper root system. If you put a drip irrigation system in there and you use it every single day, that's okay. But what will happen is the root system is going to stay right there. It knows it doesn't need to go very deep because it knows it's going to get its water every single day. So use your drip irrigation to water, again, deep, less often. Never water the leaves. Always water the soil. Always water the root ball. You never want to water the leaves. Watering the leaves can cause disease and fungus issues. So definitely don't water the leaves. Don't use an overhead sprinkler. If you can avoid it, don't do it, because that's going to breed disease. If you have to do it in the morning, not at night. Dampness and darkness cause fungus. So definitely important kind of technique there. Mulching, again, helps. It helps for watering. When you water your plants, when you put the hose down at the bottom and you just kind of let it sit there and kind of trickle, that's how I recommend doing it. Mulching will help keep that moisture and that water in that spot. If you've ever tried to water on soil will create ruts and it'll just run all over the place. But having mulch will help with your watering as well. So water deep, less often, water the roots, not the leaves, and wilting doesn't always mean that you need to water. So those are some helpful techniques on watering. So again, we're here. So those are kind of all my topics. I mean, I think you've gotten to the point now where if you do some of these things, I think you'll enjoy a bigger harvest. Tomatoes are awesome. They're so easy to grow. They're so much fun. I hope you enjoy that seminar. Those are all the techniques that we recommend. That's a lot of information there. We'll get our notes out to you as soon as we can so you have those notes. Maybe you took notes and you're ready to go. We're ready for you. Get your soil, get your sun, get your plants, get your water, get your fertilizer, get everything rolling, and have fun out there with your tomatoes. And thanks again for joining us for these webinar events. We're having a great time doing them. We're going to continue to do them. If you've got ideas of something that you think we should be talking about, let us know. We want to continue to know. And now I can answer your questions if you've got any. So let's go through some of your questions here. All right. So everybody's saying hi. Hi, Sally. Hi, Robin, Ryan. Thanks for joining. What about growing in hay bales? Okay, that's a lot of people, this was kind of the straw bale gardening is what a lot of people called it. And people did it, and it's definitely recommended. You can still do it. I don't typically carry straw bales, but you can still get them. You can probably get them at some of the big box stores or some of your local feed and seed stores. But hay bales, yes, you can definitely do it. It does take time, takes planning, takes preparation. That's probably a whole nother hour-long seminar again. But basically what you want to do is break down the center of that hay bale to basically decompose it so that it holds some moisture in, and then you can plant your tomatoes or strawberries, and you can plant on the side, you can plant on the top. It's very easy to do, and then at the end of the season, you can break it apart and use it as a mulch to help with the soil as a compost. But yes, you can definitely do it. You typically want to start with a nitrate of soda. The nitrogen will help break down that straw bale on the inside. You got to water it a lot. So there's some techniques and some steps. We actually sell a book on straw bale gardening. So if you want to come in and pick out the book, you can order it online. You can do a couple different things. You can order it through Amazon, I'm sure. But there is a straw bale book out there that is great for growing in straw bales. A lot of different options there, and you can grow right on top of concrete if you need to. They typically require a little bit more water. Staking systems become a little bit more complicated, but definitely an option. A lot of people out there can do it. It's awesome. All right. Let's see if we got any more. Yes, one of the questions, is this going to be available to watch later on? Of course, we're going to have it on our Facebook page. So, Ann, maybe you had to leave, but it's definitely going to be on our Facebook page and our website, so check that out if you need to later. Just getting on, will this be available to listen to again? Yes. So if you ended up coming a little late, you can definitely sit down and watch this at another time. I need someone to clean up my garden and prepare it for planting. Yeah, don't we all? I mean, that's what I love about, everybody's like, I bet your yard's amazing, Mike. And man, I wish I could work in my yard as much. I'm usually here when everybody else is working in their yard. So come and see me. But we can make it easy for you. If you've got a big project and you're like, I really want to plant my tomatoes, think about an earth box. Think about a container. Lots of different options out there. There's lots of different possibilities for you. So if you've got a big project and you've got a big undertaking, you need to get somebody to come out and help. Then that's something that takes a little bit more time. But you got to get your tomatoes in, and you want to do it. Think about some of those different options. Let's see. Thank you, everybody, for all your nice comments. I never knew about planting them deeper. Isn't that cool? I mean, it's one of those things that I think a lot of people make a mistake. I know I did when I first started planting. I mean, I was a beginner. I planted all my plants deeper. I said, hey, that's going to make it stronger. Bad thing to do with most plants. Tomato plants, you can actually do it because it's going to root out through that stem. How about suckering your plants? So I think I talked about that, Pam. I definitely recommend it. Don't have to do it. I think it does help with airflow and disease. I might do it a little bit here and then less often in other spots. Again, a lot of people don't do it because we're kind of in that transitional zone where we're not quite south and we're not quite north. Northerners typically do take the suckering off of the out in between the main stem and the branch because they need as much sunlight as possible because they've got cooler temperatures up north. Down south, they typically don't do it as much because it helps kind of shade the plant and keeps the tomatoes from getting sun scald on them. But a couple different options. You can do it. You don't have to do it. I definitely recommend doing a little bit of it maybe. Can I use fish emulsion or 10-10-10 as a fertilizer? Missy, great question. Fish emulsion is a great liquid fertilizer, completely organic, completely safe to use. Definitely, you can use that as a liquid fertilizer. Liquid fertilizers, remember, are going to work their way down through the soil faster. 10-10-10, you're going to see that in pretty much every publication about any kind of fertilizer. And that's because when somebody's writing a blog, a story, an article about fertilizing, they're always going to go to 10-10-10. 10-10-10 I do sell. I sell it from Espoma. They have a typical garden food. It's a synthetic fertilizer. They're always going to be synthetic. You're very rarely going to get an organic fertilizer that's going to be even keeled like that. And that is probably my biggest downfall with 10-10-10. It's classic. It's what my grandfather used to use. 10-10-10 is basic. So it's going to do an even amount of things for the plant that you use it on. So it's not a bad fertilizer to use around the yard because it doesn't do anything specific. But if you got something like tomato tone or organic green leaf, these are going to have some of the smaller trace elements like calcium and boron and zinc and iron and some different things that you're not going to get. And it's going to have a little bit more nitrogen, a little bit less phosphorus, a little bit more potassium. So you get these different variable ranges. But what's I think most important is those micronutrients. And 10-10-10 is such a basic fertilizer. It's not going to do anything specific. And sometimes you want to do something specific. So let's say you need more blooms. Then we have a blooming and rooting formula, which is very, very high in phosphorus. It's going to give it a big phosphorus boost, which is going to help it set blooms and help it set fruit. So I didn't talk about that when I was talking about fertilizer. But if you have specific needs, we tend to go more specific with fertilizers. 10-10-10 as a fertilizer is very basic, very kind of across the board. Not bad. Definitely, if you got it, use it. That's what I always say. But if you want to go more specific, tomato tone for tomatoes, garden tone for your whole vegetable garden, McDonald organic green leaf, some other kind of more specific formulas designed for Hampton Roads. Large stakes, how close to planter roots? Great question. I did not mention that. You typically don't want to go too close to you don't want to damage the root system. So I always throw my stakes in there pretty early just to get them so that the root system can work around the stakes. But if you've got an established plant and it's getting too big and you need to add a stake, probably somewhere around 10 to 12 inches away from the main stem is typically what I recommend. Tomato root systems aren't going to be extremely big on the top surface, so you're not going to damage any root system. But don't go right next to the plant. You're definitely going to probably cut some roots and hurt the plant a little bit. A great question. Somewhere between 8 and 12 inches away from the main stem is going to keep you nice and safe. You can put a few out there twining around. You can put it as close as you possibly can, about 8 inches, and then start to tie it up to it, and that'll help as well. Please address growing in hay bales. So Ellen, I didn't talk about that one. Honestly, it was something we did here for probably, about 3 or 4 years, about 3 or 4 years ago. And it is a great technique. You can definitely do it. So I definitely recommend doing it. We can help you with it. We can get you the right ingredients that you need. Again, it's all about the system, and there's some formulas. I won't go into it in detail right now, but Ellen, if you'd like to reach out to us, or if you'd like to come in, we do sell the book on straw bale gardening. But it's a great technique. It works really, really well. But there's a lot of techniques, and honestly, I don't know that I can remember every single step, but there's a lot of steps that you need to go through to get that straw bale ready and then to plant in it. and then to keep fertilizing. Similar to a container, fertilize more, water a little bit more, those types of things. But yeah, if you got more questions, definitely come in and see us. Can I trim tomatoes if they get too large? And if I do, will it affect tomato production? Well, yes, you can prune them if they get too large. That is not a problem. And yes, it probably will affect your tomato production because it's going to all those limbs or branches that you're cutting off are going to be forming tomatoes. So inevitably, you're going to be hurting a little bit. But let's say it's at 10 feet tall, it's unmanageable, and I got to cut this thing down. You can certainly cut it down and just let it grow back up, and then it's going to produce fruit again. Disinfect your pruners. But that is a good way of managing size. If it's just gotten huge over time or very short time, it's gotten so big you can't manage it, you can definitely prune it. And that's just cutting it back to allow it to grow back to somewhat of a manageable height. But indeterminate varieties never stop growing. So that's something that you want to definitely know. Let's see what else we got. I planted tomatoes early, maybe too early. The lower leaves are now yellow and gray, brown spots. Could it be cold? Yes, that is cold damage. Also, how can you recognize tomato diseases from lack of minerals, nutrients? Thank you. Great question. It probably was a little bit of cold damage. If your new leaves are coming out and they seem fine, then go ahead and start to do what I talked about earlier with pruning, taking those lower branches off, forming them into small trees, and making them a little bit more, just taking those bad leaves off. It's sending energy into those bad leaves and it's trying to support them. Why not send that energy to better leaf production? And plus it forms that good airflow and that tree look that I mentioned earlier. So definitely take those leaves off. I think it probably was cold damage. Could be the splashing of the soil that I mentioned earlier as well. We've had some rainfall. And then the lack of minerals and nutrients. So typically you're going to see that start with green veins and yellowing in between. When you've got some nice green veins, that means there's still nutrients in the veins, but the leaves are starting to yellow because it doesn't have enough nutrients. Then you need to fertilize. Try not to let it get to that point. If you're doing it pretty consistently, every 4 to 6 weeks in the ground, every 3 to 4 weeks in a container, you shouldn't experience those problems. But if you ever have an issue, maybe your soil is lacking something specific like iron or calcium or magnesium or some of those different things, bring in a leaf, let us try and diagnose the problem, and then we can get you the right specific type of thing that maybe your soil is lacking. So Robin, you said the video is pausing. I'm sorry. I noticed it's been kind of glitching, so I hope that's not causing a major issue. But hopefully this video taped really well, so if there are any major issues, you can go back and watch it. Sorry about all the video issues. I was not aware. I hope that that we continue to tape this and that we can air this later. Sorry, I know it took a long time. I was hoping to keep it 30 minutes, but I can't keep it. I couldn't. How about squash bugs, hornworms? So I see a lot of insect and disease issue questions. Squash bugs are a tough one. What they typically get on your squash plants a lot. My best technique there is take a board or a plank, lay it on the ground. At night, they're going to go there and hide. They'll hide underneath, and then you can take the board off and squash them with your foot, or you can actually spray them with triple action or another insecticide, and that way you congregate them all into one location. So that's a kind of a good little trick, is to get like a board, a plank, something that's got a little bit of square footage, lay it down in your garden. The squash bugs will hide under there at night, open it up early in the morning, spray them all, squash them all, and that's a good way of kind of getting rid of them. But also, check early. Prevention is always better than curing. Check early. They're going to lay their eggs on the underside of the squash leaves typically, and you're going to see these little black kind of dots. Squish those off, pull those off. If you see young bugs, you can pick them and throw them in a jar and throw them away. So you got a couple different options there. You can spray your plants as well. Spraying them early, of course, is always going to help. Being preventative is better. Hornworms, great question. You can use, as I mentioned earlier, that's caterpillar killer. So that'll kill the hornworms on the tomatoes. They're a bad thing in this area. That they seem to be getting worse over the years. Crop rotation also helps. Doesn't help so much with insects, but it does help with disease. Let's see. Do you have markets set up this year? Is there one in Hampton? There's not one in Hampton. There's one in Pocosin, which is pretty close, and there's one in Yorktown. And then we've got 3 in Williamsburg. So there's 2 in Williamsburg. So we've got 4 on the peninsula. Hopefully you can get to one of those. Best size pots to use. Great question. I didn't mention that either. If you're growing one tomato, a determinate variety, a smaller variety in a container, somewhere around a 10 to 12 inch container is going to probably be sufficient to get you through the year. Of course, the bigger, the better. The more soil retention, the more water retention is going to be better. But somewhere probably around 12-inch container is going to be pretty good size. Somewhere around 3 to 5 gallons of soil capacity is going to kind of be what you want. Been missing us in Hampton. We've been missing you too. I'm sorry. But hey, it's not that bad of a drive over here. There's no traffic right now. I greatly miss the Hampton store. I know. Need a Williamsburg store year round. Yep, we're working on. Every day we always thinking about different options. Thank you, Ruth. Thanks everybody for joining. Many thanks. Everybody saying thank you again. How about tomatoes in sandy soil? Sandy soil is, of course, bigger soil. It's going to allow more moisture and nutrients to go through. So add peat moss and compost. Those are going to help thicken up your clay or your sandy soil and help you hold more nutrients and water. So try a combination of compost and peat moss and sand, your soil. Those three ingredients. Don't do the perlite that I mentioned earlier. Add those nutrients in there or add those amendments, those soil amendments. It's going to thicken up your soil and you'll be able to grow tomatoes in them. Can you grow tomatoes hydroponically? Of course you can. Again, another big topic, long conversation there. So coming in, you can ask us some questions, but you definitely can grow them hydroponically. The definition of hydroponic growing is extremely broad in itself. And I'm not going to say that we're experts on hydroponics, but we can definitely help you kind of get started if that's something you want to do. Planting indeterminate tomatoes in 5-gallon buckets. Yes, you can do it. You definitely can do it. Staking is going to be the issue there. So if you're growing in buckets, make sure it's got a drain hole. Number one thing, and think about how you're going to stake these plants, because an indeterminate variety that's 6 feet tall in a 5-gallon bucket is going to blow over a lot. So think about how you're going to kind of keep it in one spot and how you're going to be able to stake it. Those are the most important things there. Other than being organic, what is the difference between organic and non-organic green leaf? That's really the basic difference is organic green leaf is derived from turkey litter. So that's where you're going to get your nitrogen and phosphorus and potassium is from a naturally byproduct. And then synthetic fertilizer is what our green leaf is. So it's a traditional fertilizer. It's engineered, it's man-made. So the biggest difference is man-made versus organic, which is from our turkey, from a turkey farm. So from turkey litter, so turkey compost basically. But the biggest difference really is our organic green leaf, if you're going to look at the numbers, is 824. Our traditional green leaf is 1248. But we made sure that they both had boron, copper, zinc, molybdenum, the iron, calcium. Those things are the trace micronutrients that our soil lacks, and so we put it in our fertilizers. So our green leaf organic has those trace elements, those micronutrients, and so does our traditional. So it's up to you which one you want to use. I still use my traditional green leaf in my vegetable garden, but you can use organic or traditional. It's personal preference. That's why we have both. But they have the trace elements, and that's the most important thing. Is Hampton Roads lacks some of those specific trace elements, and that's why we put them in our fertilizer. So great question. All right. I think I've answered all the questions, at least as many as I can. Oh, wait, we got one more from Donna. Can you explain why you are not supposed to plant tomato plants in the same spot year after year? Great question. So crop rotation, I didn't talk about that a lot, but if you've ever experienced a wilt or a disease, then that's in the soil. And so by rotating your crops, you're going to allow that wilt or that disease that's specific to tomatoes to dissipate over the years. Also, different types of plants use different types of nutrients, and so they're going to deplete the soil of those nutrients and let those nutrients naturally kind of reoccur and come back. And so by doing crop rotation helps. So if you've ever seen of an actual farm, they're going to do crop rotation, and then one year that crop that area is not going to even get used. It's just going to get let to kind of regenerate by itself. By adding compost, by adding nutrients, you just kind of let that soil take a year off, and that helps. You can also do some clover, which helps add nitrogen. You can do some cover crops, different types of things. But crop rotation really for me and for this area is if a disease gets into your plant, and some of them you don't notice as much, some of them don't actually kill the plant, they just decrease production, and maybe you thought, oh, well, this tomato just wasn't great. So tomatoes can, that disease can be in the soil, and you need to let it change over year after year. And so what you would prefer to do is rotate your crops so that you have 4 different stages. Tomatoes here, and then you move them, and they don't come back to that spot until the 4th year. Of course, that's an ideal world. Some people don't experience any problems. they plant tomatoes in the same spot every year and they do great. So hopefully that's the case for you. If you have experienced problems, try crop rotation. Usually helps with disease, also helps with nutrients in the soil. Is there a way to disinfect your soil? Not necessarily. I mean, I'm not quite sure why you would necessarily disinfect your soil. I would probably recommend doing a soil test. You can do them through your extension agent. So if you go to your extension agent or the library, when everything opens back up again, you can go get a soil sample and send it off to Virginia Tech, and they can give you a complete analysis of your soil. We only do pH here. We do have soil test kits that'll give you a nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and pH. So you can do that if that might help. The problem that I have with the Virginia Tech analysis is it's very detailed and it's for like farmers. I mean, so it's going to give you a lot of information, and some of it might kind of be overwhelming a little bit, when I think pH is one of the most important things. pH gets you in the right range. When you're in the right range, you can use all the nutrients of the fertilizer you're applying. So I don't know that I would disinfect it necessarily. Pam, so great. I think you said I answered it. So I hope that helps. And the crop rotation, I think, is probably what you were wondering there. So I think that'll help as well. So everybody, I think that's great. Thanks for all the questions. Tomatoes turned into a long topic, but thanks for joining us. I hope you grow the best tomatoes. I hope you enjoy them. And I hope you have a great time out there. Be safe. Enjoy gardening. De-stress. Get in tune with nature. Grow some food. It's so much fun. We're here at McDonald Garden Center to help you. Independent store. We've got our Great Neck location in all of our markets. We hope to see you soon. And be safe out there and have a great day. Talk to you later.